I landed in Austin just past 4, dragging my single checked bag behind me with a dull thud on the pavement. The air was still thick with late summer heat, and everything looked almost identical to how I remembered it, except for the strange stillness that met me as I climbed the front steps. No one came to the door. I stood for a moment, waiting, until I caught a glimpse of my mother through the kitchen window. She lifted her hand in a half-hearted wave, like I was a neighbor dropping by, not her daughter coming home after being blindsided by a layoff and an HR scandal I didn't even cause. The door was unlocked. I let myself in, and the first thing that hit me was the scent. Lavender with an odd undertone I couldn't place until I caught sight of the plush dog bed by the hallway console. The smell wasn't unfamiliar. Wet dog. It lingered beneath the air fresheners like a buried truth. I set my suitcase down gently by the coat rack. There was no welcome home, no question about my flight, no acknowledgement of the reason I was here. Just that lingering smell and the low hum of a ceiling fan clicking overhead. My father sat on the couch with a coffee mug in hand, eyes glued to some show I couldn't identify. He didn't look up. "Hi, Dad," I said, voice clear but not loud. A grunted, "Hey," was all I got. The silence pressed in on me as I made my way down the hall. I reached the familiar door at the end, the one with a scuff mark I'd made when I was 10, riding my bike too fast inside. Except now, it wasn't just a scuff. The entire door had changed. A polished brass knob had replaced the old one, and a neon sign was screwed above it. Zara's Den, it blinked, in pink cursive lights. I blinked back. On the floor sat a mat with paw prints and "Home Sweet Home" embroidered in bone shapes. My name wasn't anywhere. I opened the door slowly. What used to be my room, my sanctuary, was now a carefully curated dog spa. The walls had been repainted in calming sage green. There were essential oil diffusers on each nightstand. A dog-sized couch sat under the window, complete with a personalized blanket. The bookshelf that once held my college texts and favorite paperbacks now displayed jars labeled "Joint Support" and "Organic Calming Chews." My old yearbook, one I'd scribbled full of memories and inside jokes, was tucked beneath a stainless steel water bowl. For a dog, I turned around, unsure of what I was even feeling. Shock? Disbelief? Betrayal wasn't quite the word. Not yet. "Dad?" I called down the hallway. He didn't look up. "Zara's got anxiety," he replied. "She needs the space more than you do." That was it. Not a question about where I'd sleep. Not even a flinch. I stood still for a beat too long, then turned on my heel and walked to the kitchen. My mother was tossing salad, humming softly, like we were in some parallel universe where her daughter's room hadn't just been handed over to a pet with a wellness regimen. "Where's my stuff?" I asked. Without looking up, she said, "Garage, honey. We thought you'd understand. You weren't planning to stay long, right?" I pressed my palms flat against the counter, willing my voice to stay even. "No, not long." She finally met my gaze. "It's just a room, Adira." Right. Just a room. Just a lifetime of posters, memories, dreams, now wiped clean for a labradoodle. "It's fine," I said. "I'll grab what I need." I didn't slam the door as I made my way to the garage. Didn't stomp or snap. But each step felt heavier than the last. The garage was dim, lit only by a bulb that flickered when I pulled the chain. Dust hung in the air like secrets. My things had been shoved into a single corner, boxes marked with my name in fading Sharpie, my desk lamp bent sideways. My clothes were haphazardly thrown into a plastic tub, some of them covered in pet hair. My laptop case was open, empty. I didn't even bother asking. I knelt to pick up my sketchbook, the one I used back in high school when I still believed in design school and had dreams beyond spreadsheets. It was crushed beneath one of Zara's old chew toys, gnawed, drool-stained, forgotten. I sat on the floor, my knees touching the cold concrete. No one had thought to call me before this transformation. No email. No, "Hey, we're thinking of turning your room into the dog's space." Just silence. It was only then I remembered the night I'd first moved into that room, after winning first place in my 7th grade science fair. My dad had carried the box of books, proud, calling me kiddo. My mom had made my favorite spaghetti. Now they gave that same room to Zara, a dog. "Dinner's in 10, my father called from inside the house, his voice casual, like he hadn't just redefined what home meant to me. I didn't answer, just sat there a little longer, tracing the edge of the sketchbook with my thumb. The garage didn't feel like mine, the house didn't either. This place remembered everything about them, but had somehow forgotten me. When I finally stood, brushing dust off my jeans, I made my way back down the hallway. I paused once more in front of the door, blinking at the relentless pink neon, Zara's den. I didn't cry, but inside, something splintered, quiet, clean, irreversible. I came home to find my room had a new owner, and she had 4 legs and a better mattress than I ever did. "Oh good, you're here. Zara's about to go live." Cora's voice rang out from the kitchen like she was announcing a special guest's arrival at a private event. I turned toward the sound, and there she was, hair curled just right, full face of makeup, holding Zara like a trophy, and not a rescue dog with an anxiety vest. She wore a lavender top that matched Zara's bandana, both embroidered with their matching brand logo, Zen. "Adira," she beamed, but her eyes didn't pause long on me. "I was hoping you'd get here before the intro. I need the house quiet for the next 45 minutes. We're doing a meditation stream." "Meditation? For a dog?" "I'll stay out of the way," I replied, already stepping back toward the hallway. She walked past me without hesitation, Zara in one arm, her other hand adjusting the camera mounted on a ring light near the living room window. "The energy here's been a little chaotic lately," she said over her shoulder, "and Zara's so sensitive to that." "You know how it is." I nodded, though I didn't. "Sure." "Oh, your scarves. They were in the closet. Zara's allergic to wool, so I moved them." She handed me a small plastic bag with a few wrinkled pieces of fabric poking out. I took it without comment. "I used to think being quiet was noble," I said to myself as I walked toward the kitchen. Turns out it just made me invisible. Inside, my mother was pouring hot water over a floral tea bag, placing the mug in front of Cora's spot at the table. When I came in, she glanced at me, then pulled a different mug from the back of the cabinet. It had a chip in the handle and a faded Santa from some department store promotion. "Want tea, honey?" "Sure." I pulled out a stool and sat across from her. She poured hot water into the chipped mug, then turned back to the fridge without another word. I let the silence breathe before asking, "Did no one think to ask me about the room?" Mom's back stiffened. She took a breath, then said softly, "You're barely ever here, sweetheart." "That's not an answer." She turned around slowly, holding a container of almond milk. "It's not a big deal, honey. Zara needs routine. That room keeps her centered. You'll understand once you settle again. These animals, they need structure." "I did too," I said flatly. "Once." Her eyes met mine, but only for a moment. Then she turned away. In this house, animals had anxiety. I just had expectations I wasn't allowed to have. Zara barked from the hallway, and Cora's laughter followed. The sound carried as I walked back toward the neon-glowing doorway. Zara's den. I paused there until the light from Cora's studio spilled into the hallway. She had left the door ajar. Curiosity pushed me forward. The room, my room, was now a set. Ring lights, tripods, and a mounted microphone pointed towards Zara's tiny lounge sofa. A diffuser pumped out a misty blend of something vaguely citrus and herbal. A Wellness Wednesday board stood against the wall, decorated with paper cutouts of affirmations like "Trust your tail" and "Breathe like a basset." On the far side, one of my old canvas boards was now repurposed as a backdrop, painted over with pastel rainbows. I reached out and ran a finger along the edge, catching the texture of the original brushstrokes. If you looked closely, beneath the layers of paint, my name was still faintly carved into the wood. "Adira." Zara barked again, this time louder. I stepped back and closed the door without a sound. This was no longer a house filled with echoes of me, it was a curated set, and I wasn't part of the script. Dinner came not long after. The kitchen smelled of reheated lasagna. The television hummed in the background, showing a rerun of some old reality show no one was actually watching. Cora talked non-stop about brand engagement, follower counts, and a potential deal with a pet food company that focused on gut health-first nutrition for dogs with emotional trauma. She's averaging nearly 12,000 engagements per post now, Cora said proudly. Mom nodded like she understood what that meant. Dad muttered, "That's more than most small businesses get." I cleared my throat. "I've been thinking about freelancing again, picking up a few design contracts." Silence. Cora blinked, then offered a brittle smile. "That's cute. You always needed a bit more structure though, remember?" Dad nodded again, but this time at Cora. "Zara might need a bigger space soon. I was thinking, maybe the guest room?" I didn't say anything, didn't flinch, but something inside me curled tighter. There are things people won't say to your face, but they'll say around it, and it'll hit harder. I finished my food slowly, letting every bite sit longer than it needed to. The lasagna was bland, like the energy around the table. Finally, I stood, gathering my plate. "I'll sleep on the couch tonight," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Oh, honey, it's temporary," Mom said with a warm tone that felt more like a reflex than concern. I looked toward my father. He hadn't even glanced up, not once during the meal. "So am I whispered. The garage door creaked as I lifted it, the metal groaning like it had something to say but didn't know how. The morning air clung to the concrete, cool and stale, mixed with the scent of motor oil and dust. Light filtered in through the gaps in the side panels, just enough to show the bins stacked against the far wall. I didn't need to walk far to see it. One bin had a fluorescent pink label slapped on the front. "Donate. Old stuff." Inside were pieces of me. My varsity jacket, the one my dad had given me a high five over when I made the team sophomore year. My diploma from UT, framed, dusty, and tilted sideways like it had been dropped. My signed copy of Lean In, a gift from a former mentor, tucked beneath a stack of bent notebooks. Everything packed without care, like it had been a cleanup chore. I knelt and pulled the jacket out, shaking off the plastic scent of long-forgotten cloth. My fingers traced the stitched letters, the initials that once made me feel part of something. Dad used to call me Kiddo whenever I wore this, the kind of nickname that stuck in your heart more than your ears. But the sting wasn't the jacket, it was the label. They didn't ask what I wanted to keep. They didn't check what mattered. They just assumed I wouldn't be back. People say home is where they remember you. But what if they replaced you? I stayed there a while longer, letting the silence speak what no one in the house would dare say. When I finally stood and closed the bin, I didn't touch anything else. I walked inside quietly, washing my hands in the laundry sink before heading to the kitchen. Later that day, I tried to help Mom prepare dinner. She was slicing cherry tomatoes, humming an old country tune she used to sing on road trips. The smell of basil and garlic floated through the air, mingling with the static of a football game echoing from the living room. I reached for the cutting board, but she moved her hand just slightly, guiding it away from me. "You rest, sweetie," she said, like I'd just come in from a battlefield. "You've had a lot on your mind." I forced a nod, even though every word stung. That wasn't comfort. That was dismissal wrapped in soft tone. Then she added, "Also, maybe don't bring up any work stuff tonight, okay? Cora's had a stressful week." That stopped me. "She's had a stressful week?" Mom didn't flinch. She placed the sliced tomatoes into a bowl and said, "Zara had a skin reaction to the new shampoo. Poor thing was scratching all night." I bit the inside of my cheek. I'd been out of work for a month. Rent coming up, no insurance. But apparently Cora's dog getting a rash was the headline in this house. "I won't say anything," I muttered. The evening carried on like a show rehearsed too many times. The table was set with folded napkins and matching silverware. Cora was already on her phone, likely snapping photos for some behind-the-scenes content. Zara sat at her feet in a matching bib, panting like she was waiting for applause. Don, one of Dad's old work friends, joined us for dinner. He was harmless enough, but the way he leaned in when Cora spoke made my skin itch. Cora talked about Zara's latest partnership, a grain-free, organic, ocean-fed dog food brand that had scientifically formulated calming effects. "She's averaging over 12,000 engagements per post now," Cora said, sipping her wine like it was a mic drop. Dad beamed. That's more than most regional campaigns get. I cleared my throat gently. I've been looking into freelance design again. Some project-based stuff. No one said anything. A beat passed. Then Dawn chuckled awkwardly, and Cora, without lifting her eyes, said, "That's cute." You always needed structure, though. I opened my mouth, but couldn't find the words before Dad added, "Zara might need the guest room soon. We've been thinking about opening up more space for her photo shoots." I sat back in my chair, blinking once, then again. The room dimmed, not from the lights, but from something colder. "I was going to ask if I could use the car this week," I said, voice steady, too calm. Dad didn't miss a beat. He took a long sip of his wine, wiped his mouth, and said, "Dead weight doesn't need wheels. What you need is to stay grounded until you're useful again." Laughter from Dawn. Silence from Mom. Cora looked down at her plate. I didn't move, didn't speak. My whole body locked in place. It wasn't just the insult, it was how familiar it felt, like he'd said it before, maybe not out loud, but always loud enough in his eyes. I excused myself quietly and made my way down the hallway. In the narrow space between the bathroom and the guest room, I leaned against the wall and pressed my palms flat to the wallpaper. My breathing was shallow, but deliberate. I started listing everything I had contributed over the years, when they were short on bills, when Mom needed help with her prescriptions, when Cora's old camera broke and I lent her mine. I'd never asked for anything back, not once, but here I was, the dead weight, and I remembered something else. As a kid, they used to say I was the quiet one. It was meant as a compliment, like I was easy, no drama, no pushback. Now I see that wasn't praise, it was permission. Permission to ignore me, to mute me when I became inconvenient. By the time I returned to the table, my father was laughing again, another one of Cora's punchlines. Zara barked once like she agreed. Mom looked up and asked, "Everything okay, sweetheart?" I smiled, clearing my plate with both hands. "Perfect," I said. Inside, I didn't feel perfect, but if silence was power, I had a whole vault of it. The next morning, I was up before the sun had fully warmed the sidewalks. I had a coffee meeting planned downtown. Nothing formal, just a chance to reconnect with an old coworker who now ran freelance design gigs. It was a small spark of something that felt like forward motion. I grabbed my keys from the hook, tossed my tote over my shoulder, and opened the front door. The light was soft, sky still tinged with blue-gray. But as I stepped onto the porch, Cora appeared like a choreographed entrance in a show I hadn't auditioned for. She held Zara in one arm, the other holding her phone as she adjusted her angle. Her outfit was carefully curated, leggings that cost more than my weekly groceries, a windbreaker zipped halfway, revealing a branded sports bra beneath. Her hair was twisted into a casual top knot, except there was nothing casual about the way every strand stayed perfectly in place. "Hold on! I'll be right there," she called into her phone. Then to me, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "You can't use the driveway. Zara's got a photo shoot in 10. Natural light's best right now." I stopped at the edge of the steps. "I have a meeting. I'll be out in 20. Cora blinked, almost surprised I'd said anything at all. "The handler's already on the way, Adira. I mean, you'll understand once you see the setup. We're trying a new turmeric treat shot. It's part of her anxiety relief campaign." I held my keys tightly. "Can you move the car?" Her expression didn't shift. Zara gets anxious when her space is disrupted, and this light, she gestured toward the driveway, is perfect. Behind me, the screen door creaked. Dad was in his usual spot, coffee mug in hand, newspaper folded like a prop. He didn't say a word, just watched. That was when I realized I wasn't being asked to make space. I was expected to disappear. I wasn't in the way. I was outside the frame entirely. I didn't argue. I turned, walked back inside, and passed Dad without looking. His eyes followed me, but his mouth stayed shut. In the kitchen, Mom was buttering toast. The air smelled like cinnamon and coconut oil. "She has deadlines too, honey," she said as I walked past. "We just try to support both of you. Both of you." I bit the inside of my cheek. Both suggested equality, balance. It ignored the very real fact that one of us had their name on a neon sign over what used to be my room, and the other had their things shoved in a garage like clutter. Zara barked outside, sharp and loud. Mom chuckled, completely unfazed. She knows when the energy's off, sensitive girl. I didn't respond. Because what was the point? When you make peace with invisibility, you stop expecting an apology. An hour later, I found myself back in the garage. Not for any practical reason, just following a thread of discomfort that needed tugging. I opened a second bin I hadn't checked the day before. It was half-lidded, red marker bleeding across the top. Donate? All good? Inside were my framed awards from high school and college, a stack of old Polaroids, and the sketch of a dorm layout I had once dreamed of building for my future design firm. On top of it all was my science fair medal, 7th grade, first place in environmental design. I remembered Dad cheering in the stands, arms up like I'd won the Super Bowl. Now it sat crooked in a bin, next to a faded Starbucks gift card and a half-empty box of chalk pastels. I whispered, mostly to myself, "All good." Maya Angelou's voice echoed in my head. "When people show you who they are, believe them the first time." I snapped the lid back on and stood there a moment longer, just breathing, just standing. That night, the air inside the house had a thickness to it, the kind that doesn't come from humidity. It came from withheld words, passive glances, and unfinished thoughts. Dinner was silent. The TV murmured some low-volume game commentary in the background, but no one paid it real attention. Cora scrolled through her phone with one hand and cut her salmon with the other. Mom passed the salad without speaking. Dad cleared his throat, a signal I knew well. He was about to make a statement dressed as a suggestion. "We're thinking of expanding the den," he said. "Might knock out the wall to the guest room." I looked up from my plate, met his eyes. So no one thought to ask me what I planned to do next? Cora looked up then, blinking like she'd just noticed I was there. "We didn't think you had a plan. It's been a while, Adira." I held her gaze. "Maybe it's time I make one, without asking you." There was a pause, a freeze in the air. Even Zara stopped licking her paw. No one said anything after that. Later, upstairs in what was technically still the guest room, I opened my laptop and started a document. At the top, I typed, "What's mine?" and what was taken without asking. I listed everything from my name on that room to the equipment I'd bought and left here for family use that now powered Cora's influencer brand. The more I typed, the steadier my hands felt. Outside the door, I heard murmuring. My parents' voices, too low to make out completely, but the cadence was unmistakable. Soft concern, cautious tones. Then my mother's voice rose just enough to catch the words. "She's not like Zara. She doesn't bounce back." I closed the laptop. No, I didn't bounce. I rebuilt. The next morning, I moved through the kitchen like someone sneaking through a stranger's house. Not because I feared being caught, but because I knew I didn't belong. I reached for the key hook, the small one by the pantry where we'd always kept them. My key, silver with a blue plastic cap, was gone. I checked the counter, the drawers, even the ceramic bowl we used to toss random receipts and loose change in. Nothing. I turned to the living room. My father was in his chair, reading the paper, his coffee resting on a coaster that read, "World's Okayest Dad." I cleared my throat lightly. "Have you seen my car key?" He didn't lower the paper. "Did you check the garage?" No follow-up. No effort to help. I walked out through the laundry room, past the squeaky back door, into the garage. After a few seconds of scanning, I spotted it, my key, tucked between bags of dog treats inside a plastic drawer labeled Zara's Snacks. I picked it up without comment. As I stood there holding it, a thought settled into my chest like a stone. You know you're not welcome when your things start disappearing from plain sight. That afternoon, I sat on the guest bed, the same one they used when hosting distant cousins or church friends, and opened my duffel. I began folding clothes into it slowly. Some were still wrinkled from the garage. Others smelled faintly of cedar balls and neglect. I pulled out my laptop and plugged it in. The battery icon blinked red for a second before going black. It took a few tries before it held a charge long enough to open. I scrolled through my email, checking for leads on housing in Santa Fe. I'd hesitated before, unsure if I really wanted to leave. But now, the hesitation was gone. It had been replaced by something clearer, sharper. From the hallway, I heard my father's voice. He was on the phone. "She just needs a few more days to come to her senses," he said, chuckling. "She always cools off eventually." I didn't move, didn't react. They never thought I'd leave, not because I couldn't, but because I always stayed. By early evening, I had packed enough to make it clear this wasn't a short-term tantrum. This was intentional. I walked out of the room, my steps slow but deliberate, and entered the living room where Mom and Dad sat in their usual spots, watching some show on mute while scrolling through their phones. Cora wasn't there. For once, the house was quiet enough to say something out loud. I stood between them and the TV. The glow of the screen lit their faces in blues and grays. "I'll be leaving tomorrow," I said plainly. "Please don't touch any of my things again." Mom looked up, surprised. "It's not that deep, sweetie." I looked at her, then at Dad, then back to her. "It's deep enough when your name disappears from your own walls." Dad sighed and leaned forward. "You're being dramatic." "This is still your home." "Then why does it feel like a set designed for someone else's life?" I asked. Neither of them answered. Zara barked somewhere down the hall like she was filling in the space they refused to occupy. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The sheets on the guest bed were crisp, too clean, like they'd never been lived in. I sat up, opened my laptop again, and went digging through old files I hadn't touched in years. One folder caught my eye. Zen Concept 2019. Inside was everything: logo mock-ups, website prototypes, initial outreach emails, brand decks with my name signed at the bottom. I scrolled further and found it, a PDF titled LLC Initial Filing Draft. I clicked. My name was listed as co-founder. The original concept had been filed under both our names, Cora and mine. I remembered that day clearly now. I'd spent hours writing up the business plan, Cora gushing over how we were finally doing something together. I never saw the final submission. A year later, Zara's Zen launched under her solo LLC. I whispered to the quiet room, "That's why they never really wanted me around. I was a liability." Someone who remembered too much. I saved the document to an encrypted folder and emailed a backup to myself. I stared at the ceiling, heart steady, not racing. This wasn't a breakdown. It was clarity. If I left tomorrow, I'd leave with proof of who I really was here, not just what they wanted me to be. The note was folded like an afterthought, tucked under my coffee mug with a pink paw print doodled on the corner. "If you're leaving, can you take Zara's old toys too?" No thanks, no good luck, not even a half-hearted smiley face. Just a request, like I was still their housekeeper, not their daughter. I crumpled it and dropped it in the trash without hesitation. Then I poured myself a cup of coffee, steady hands, no trembling. I didn't even add milk. The bitterness felt right. Even when I was leaving, I was still expected to be useful, to their convenience. It was so typical, it almost made me laugh. I stood by the sink, letting the hot mug warm my fingers, and stared out at the backyard where Zara was sniffing a patch of grass like it held the secrets of the universe. Her vest read, "Do not pet, emotional support animal." I envied the clarity of her role. Everyone knew where she stood. The rest of the morning unfolded in silence. I packed my car slowly, one box at a time. No rush, just intention. Each taped lid was a small declaration. I was done letting them make room for me in storage bins. I would make room for myself somewhere else. Dad stood on the porch with his arms crossed. He didn't offer to help. He didn't ask where I was going. He just watched, like he was waiting for me to change my mind. Mom eventually stepped out. She stopped a few feet from the car, wrapped in a cardigan, even though the sun had already burned off the morning chill. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice soft but not uncertain. "I do," I replied. "For me." She didn't say anything after that. Her eyes welled, but she didn't reach for me. I closed the trunk gently. The latch clicked with finality. I climbed into the driver's seat, adjusted the mirror, and pulled away. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know who waved and who didn't. By late afternoon, I was in Santa Fe. The streets were dry and dappled with gold. The sky stretched wide, uninterrupted, like a clean slate waiting to be drawn on. My GPS led me to a modest stucco building nestled between a pottery shop and a tiny cafe with turquoise benches out front. Darcy was waiting outside, leaning against the doorway with a grin that felt like sunlight. "You made it," she said, pulling me into a quick hug. "How's the car holding up?" "Better than me," I joked, and we both laughed. Real laughter, not the tight-lipped version I'd been faking for weeks. We carried the boxes upstairs together. The studio apartment was small, but filled with light. The floors were worn wood, the kind that creaked in the right places. There was a tiny balcony with a cracked chair and a view of the alley. It was perfect. "It's not fancy," Darcy said as she handed me the keys. "That's exactly what I need," I said. And I meant it. That night, after the boxes were stacked neatly and the sheets on the bed were tucked tight, I sat on the floor with my laptop. Not because I had work to do, but because something gnawed at me, a lingering pull, curiosity maybe, or instinct. I typed in Zara Zen and hit enter. The website looked the same, glossy, curated, full of carefully worded affirmations and pastel branding. I clicked on a recent blog post titled, "How My Sister's Chaos Taught Me Patience." The bile rose before I finished the first paragraph. She'd used our childhood. My childhood. The broken family car, the night I forgot my lines in the school play and cried backstage while she smiled for the camera. Every detail twisted to fit a redemption arc that painted me as the emotional burden and her as the savior. There was even a photo. Us as kids, at a birthday party. I remembered that day vividly. I had organized the whole thing because Mom was sick. Cora had shown up late and taken credit for the cake design. The photo had been cropped to show only her hand cutting the cake. My face, the one smiling beside it, was cropped out. No credit, no mention. When someone tells the story long enough, the world forgets it wasn't theirs to begin with, I whispered. I took screenshots, every line, every image. I cataloged it carefully. I wasn't planning revenge, not yet, but I needed truth, and now I had it, on paper. Later that night, I lit a small candle, something Darcy had left by the windowsill, a gift from a client. It smelled like cinnamon and cedar. I opened my encrypted folder and titled a new one, Zen Receipts. Inside, I saved the screenshots, the LLC filings, the mock-ups I'd designed in 2019, the email chains, the buried proof that Zara Zen didn't start with Cora and a dog with anxiety. It started with two sisters, one of whom was now erased. I didn't need revenge. I needed facts, a timeline, a record. I stared at the flickering candlelight and let the silence settle into my bones, not heavy, not cold, just quiet. Like the calm before something real. Then, as if summoned by the shift in air, my inbox pinged. Darcy had sent me a message. Subject, legal contact. Body, she's good, quiet, but sharp. You'll like her. I closed the laptop, the screen dimming into black. Darcy's email came in just after breakfast. I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight leaking across the floor like spilled paint, my coffee still too hot to sip. Her message was short, concise in a way only someone who knew you deeply could manage. Her name's Liz, business fraud, quiet, sharp. She's seen stuff like this before, especially with families. That last part hung in my head longer than it should have, especially with families. I opened the Dropbox Darcy had helped me set up, started organizing folders, screenshots, emails, timestamps, brand mock-ups I had designed, LLC drafts I'd co-written before being quietly written out, the tax forms I'd downloaded weeks ago but hadn't dared open again. This time I wasn't reacting, I was assembling. It's always the people closest to you who bet on your silence. And for a while, I'd let them win that bet. Mid-morning, I received a link from an old colleague, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. No greeting. Just a single sentence, thought you'd want to see this. I clicked. The headline read, Zara's Zen products under investigation after reports of adverse pet reactions. Beneath it, a photograph of Cora in her signature pastel hoodie, holding Zara like a handbag accessory. The article laid it out in bullet points. A batch of supplements had triggered severe reactions in several dogs. One nearly died. An anonymous whistleblower claimed Cora had pushed ahead with the promo despite warnings. Zara's Zen was now under federal review. Cora's name was listed as co-founder and lead ambassador. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. Karma isn't always poetic. Sometimes it's just processed. Later that day, I opened the flagged tax folder Darcy had quietly pointed me toward. I hadn't dared check it too closely before. But now, my hands didn't shake. My fingers scrolled with purpose. One line stood out. Consultant, $7,200, SSN. Ending in 1834, Adira Singleton. I didn't remember ever being paid. I never received a 1099. I certainly never approved the use of my social security number. I wasn't just erased. I was exploited. I took screenshots. I copied the document, highlighted the line, added a note. Unauthorized use, no disclosure, no consent. I attached the files to a fresh email, addressed it to Liz, the legal contact Darcy had sent. Subject, identity misuse plus unauthorized tax filing. Body, I believe this was done without my knowledge. Please advise on next steps. As I clicked send, a new thought hit me. Now they'd have to say my name, just not in the way they planned to. The silence of the afternoon was broken by a call. Unknown number. I answered out of instinct. Adira? Cora's voice was thin, papery. I could hear her pacing. I didn't know they used your info. I thought Dad handled that. No, I said, keeping my voice flat. You used my name to write off a lie. There was a pause. I could hear the hum of electronics, maybe her home studio or a running dishwasher. Then she whispered, We're under review. Sponsors are pulling out. Zara's page got flagged for deceptive promotion. Sounds like a personal brand problem, I said. Please, she exhaled. Don't press charges. We're family. No, I repeated. We were a brand. You made it that. She didn't respond. I didn't hang up immediately. I let the silence stretch long enough for her to feel it. Then, finally, I said, Maybe you should have acted like family when it actually counted. And I hung up. That night, I sat in bed with my laptop propped against a pillow. The candle Darcy had gifted me months earlier flickered gently beside the screen. An email from Liz had arrived. I'll be filing an identity fraud claim tomorrow. Do not engage further unless instructed. Gather everything. I did as I was told. Organized every file into clearly labeled folders, screenshots, design drafts, emails, the blog post. Cora wrote twisting my life into content, the tax forms. Then, just before shutting down for the night, another email pinged. A Dropbox link. From Liz. Inside was a folder labeled Cora Tax Audit 2022. I clicked. Invoices, internal memos, flagged deductions, notes from the IRS requesting clarification. Every lie tracked and time-stamped. I leaned back in bed, let out a slow breath. I didn't burn the bridge. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already on fire. I let the phone ring twice before answering. It was instinct more than hesitation. I already knew the voice on the other end, knew the tone before I heard it. Adira, Dad said, clipped and low. We're in a situation. It's bad. I leaned back into the kitchen chair, staring at the spot on the wall where sunlight used to hit before I rearranged the table. The kitchen was quiet. Not even the hum of the fridge felt intrusive now. I'm listening, I said, voice steady. Cora's being looked into. By regulators. They might reach out to you for background, since, you were involved. Early on. Early on. Like I was a silent partner in someone else's dream. Like it hadn't been my logo, my design, my business plan buried beneath her curated pastel branding. I see, I replied. No tremble. No pause. He cleared his throat, sounding older than I remembered. If they contact you, keep it measured. No need to escalate things. You'll hear from someone, I said. And hung up. I didn't smile, didn't feel vindicated. When the world finally sees what you already knew, it doesn't feel like justice. It feels overdue. 2 hours later, my phone started buzzing. It began with a DM on Instagram, then a tag on Twitter, then a friend sent a text with just 3 words. It's out there. I opened the link. It was a video, grainy, phone recorded, but unmistakable. Cora sitting at the dinner table, Zara in her lap. Dad, wineglass in hand, laughing as he said, "Dead weight doesn't need wheels." The video paused for a second, zooming in on my face, stone still, mid-bite, blinking once. Then it ended. The poster was Don. Of course it was. His thread was long. Accusations, receipts, screenshots from old promotional emails, internal back and forths. All from his time helping Cora launch her wellness empire. The clip took off fast. Within hours, it was everywhere. TikTok edits with dramatic music. Facebook comment wars. Twitter threads arguing whether I was the forgotten daughter or just bitter. The headlines followed. Zara Zen's founding family in chaos. Dogfluencer empire crumbles after tax fraud allegations. Deadweight? Internet sides with silent sister. I watched the chaos unfold from my studio, curtains drawn, laptop humming beside me. I didn't comment, didn't like, didn't block, just watched. Later that night, I opened a fresh document and began writing a formal summary. I included the original co-founding documents, dated and signed. Screenshots of the LLC transfer I was never told about, copies of the tax filings using my social security number. I attached everything in a zipped folder labeled, "For Record and Accountability." The email went to Liz, the fraud attorney, to 3 sponsors I knew were still listed on Cora's site, to 2 journalists who had covered the rise of Zara Zen 2 years ago. Subject line, documentation, co-founder and identity misuse. No press release, no captions, just the facts. Darcy texted me minutes later. That was cold and clean. I replied, it had to be. If they want to burn the house down, I'll hand them the match, but I'm not lighting it. By morning, the Zara Zen homepage redirected to a "We're updating our offerings" placeholder. The social media pages were silent. Engagement plummeted. Sponsored posts vanished overnight. Then came the family group chat. I hadn't opened it in weeks, but the notifications stacked like bricks until I finally tapped in. Cora. They pulled my PayPal. Everything's frozen. Are you happy now? Eve. You could have handled this privately. Lou. Honey, let's fix this together. I didn't respond, didn't even type. I've never been so surrounded by noise and felt so free from obligation. That evening, I placed my phone on Do Not Disturb, set my laptop aside, and walked to the window. The sky above Santa Fe had turned to velvet with streaks of gold clinging to the edges. I exhaled slowly, letting the quiet expand. My body felt lighter, like the weight had been drained instead of dropped. Then the notification came. A news alert. One of the bigger outlets had picked it up. Headline, Zara Zen Scandal, When Family Business Goes Wrong. The image below was a side-by-side, Cora on the left, beaming, holding Zara in a yoga pose. Me on the right, cropped from that same birthday photo she had used years ago, but now I was named. Not tagged anonymously, not shadowed, I had a name. And now, so did the truth. Minutes later, a message arrived. From Mom. If you don't stop this, you're not our daughter anymore. I stared at the screen, read it twice. Then again, I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. Because I'd already stopped being their daughter the moment they decided I was a liability instead of a legacy. I stared at the screen, rereading the message twice. If you don't stop this, you're not our daughter anymore. The words weren't shocking. They weren't even surprising. They landed like something I'd already braced for. Like an earthquake I knew was coming, because I'd felt the tremors my whole life. That word, daughter, had always come with a string attached. I was their daughter when I was obedient. I was family when I filled in their blanks, cleaned up their chaos, gave more than I was ever given. I didn't respond. I didn't rage. I didn't write back. I didn't save the message to reread later like I used to. I deleted it. Then I emptied the trash folder, just to make sure. And finally, calmly, I blocked the number. They raised me to be silent. I finally learned to be still. Before I'd even finished my coffee, the texts started coming in from people I hadn't heard from in years. An old coworker, a high school classmate. Even the woman who used to run the front desk at my old gym. "Girl, I just saw the video. You okay?" "They really called you that on camera?" "You're trending, just a heads up." I opened my browser. Zara's Zen wasn't just a scandal now, it was a collapse. Commenters had dissected every frame of the leaked dinner video. They'd pulled up tax filings, zoomed in on inconsistent LLC data, posted side-by-side screenshots of Cora's old blog, where she described the business as a solo mission, contradicting every public reference to our shared childhood inspiration. The press ran with it. Zara's Zen faces tax probe after dead weight clip sparks public outrage. Brand built on family values implodes under fraud allegations. From wellness queen to legal quicksand, the Cora Redmond story. And still, my phone buzzed. A local news station in Austin replayed the video. They added a watermark this time, stamped their logo on the shame. Eve issued a statement. Short, defensive. Families argue, this was a private moment taken out of context. He didn't apologize. He didn't mention my name. Just a private moment. Cora, of course, went silent. Her social media went dark. The comments on her last post, an inspirational quote about healing, now read like satire. But the one message that caught me off guard came from Mom. It was short. "Please help her. She's spiraling." I read it 3 times, unsure whether to feel insulted or sad, maybe both. They didn't want my truth, only my fix. Later that evening, while sorting receipts and filing digital evidence folders, I stumbled upon an envelope I'd tucked away months ago. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. I remembered it arriving one Tuesday, no return address. I hadn't opened it then. I wasn't ready. But now felt right. I sat on the floor, the envelope soft from humidity, and peeled it open. The letter was dated last year, postmarked but never mailed. It began simply, "You were never the favorite, but you were always the glue." My throat tightened. I read the next lines slowly. "I let your father shape the narrative. I let Cora take up more space than she earned. I saw you. I just didn't know how to hold that truth and keep the house calm at the same time." She wrote about watching me quietly pick up slack, handling bills, errands, emotional fires, and choosing not to say anything because, as she put it, "You always seemed okay until you weren't." She closed with, "I hope one day you'll understand it wasn't about not loving you. It was about fearing what would happen if I said it out loud." I didn't cry because of the words themselves. I cried because they came too late. Recognition after abandonment isn't healing. It's a summary. Twilight had already swallowed the horizon when I stepped out onto the tiny balcony with a cup of tea. The city buzzed below, unaware of the storm still clinging to my ribs. I opened my notebook. On the first page, I wrote a list. What I lost. Then, what I kept. I didn't include material things, just moments, memories. What I built that no one could erase. I thought about how I never asked for revenge. I just wanted room to be heard. And when I didn't get that, I learned to build a life in the silence they left behind. Being quiet wasn't weakness. It was survival. Now, I wasn't bitter. I was clean. It's not the apology that fixes the wound. It's the space you make around the scar. As I finished my tea, the phone buzzed once more. This time, it wasn't a text or a trending alert. It was a voicemail. Unknown number. I hesitated, then pressed play. "Adira, it's me. Dad." His voice was slow, unsure. "I need to talk to you. It's not about Cora. It's about the house." His breath hitched like he wasn't sure how to finish. I let the message play until the end, then set the phone down. I stared at the wall for a long moment. And then I whispered, "Too late." I played the voicemail again the next morning, letting my father's voice fill the stillness of my apartment one more time. Adira, I need to talk to you. It's not about Cora. It's about the house. His voice wavered, unsure of itself in a way I'd never heard. The man who once commanded a household with raised eyebrows and lowered tones now sounded like someone standing on the edge of something he couldn't control. He mentioned documents, something about my name being on older papers, something about needing to clear it up before lawyers got involved. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't a conversation, it was an attempt to loop me back in through paperwork and pressure. I didn't respond. Instead, I closed my laptop and made a cup of coffee. Slowly, deliberately. For the first time in months, I didn't feel guilt for not replying. I didn't feel obligated to soften, to comfort, to bend. There was nothing left to save there. Not the version of me they wanted, and certainly not the structure they'd built on top of my quiet compliance. It always takes a fire for people to remember who built the walls. By noon, another message came in, this time a voicemail, not from him, but from her. If you hadn't walked away, none of this would have happened. Eve's voice was tighter this time, sharper, and then Lou followed. This isn't you. You're not this cruel. Cruel. That word sat differently, especially from someone who sat silently every time I was set aside, who told me I was strong every time she needed me to stay quiet. Cora's message came last. Just one sentence. I didn't mean to lose everything, just needed space. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't reply. Instead, I screenshotted each one, archived them neatly into a folder called Family Messages. Accountability always sounds like cruelty to the ones used to immunity. Later that afternoon, an email popped up in my inbox. Subject: For you, if you care. It was from Cora. The message began with, I've always envied how calm you are. She wrote that when I was small, she always thought I had some kind of magic that kept me centered, even when things fell apart. She said Mom and Dad gave her the spotlight, but that it never felt real because she knew I was doing the work in the shadows. She admitted to copying my ideas. Said it started small, design tweaks, caption phrasing, even the way I wrote emails. Then it grew. It became easy, easier than building something herself. You didn't scream, she wrote. Even when they ignored you, you didn't explode. That's what scared me most. She ended with, I didn't think you'd actually leave. I guess I hoped you wouldn't. I read it through twice, then a third time. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel validation. The apology wasn't for me. It was a prayer for her own soul. That evening, I climbed to the rooftop of my building, tea in hand, notebook tucked under one arm. The sky was soft and open, the kind that didn't press in but made space. I sat with my legs crossed, the city's hum miles below. I deleted the last batch of texts, set up two-factor authentication on everything, made sure no trace of me existed where I didn't want it to be anymore. Then, I opened a draft email to my lawyer. Subject: Official dissociation filing. Body: Please proceed with removing me from all liability connected to the Redmond family entities. I've attached the documentation. Attached, a folder labeled Proof I Lived Here. It included all my designs, all my emails, every co-founder draft, tax records, message logs. I didn't need to send a letter to Cora or call my parents to explain. I didn't need an ending. I needed a point I didn't have to explain anymore. As I hit send, my breath left me not as a sigh, but as a release. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't family. It was a missed call from a journalist I'd ignored 3 times already. I stared at the number, then leaned back in my chair. If they want the truth, I'll let them hear it. From me, for once. I kept staring at the blinking cursor after typing the first sentence. I used to think loyalty meant staying quiet. It felt heavier than anything I'd written before, not because it was dramatic or poetic, but because it was finally honest. The truth wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It sat still and heavy, pressing into my ribs like an old scar that finally got named. The sun filtered through the apartment window, warming the edge of the table and lighting up the dust dancing in the air. I sipped my tea, let the silence stretch. Writing wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about exposure. It was about release, and I was writing it for me. Not for clicks, not for them, just to remember what I had let go so I could finally breathe. I thought back to my first day of college. I remembered the nervous pride on my mother's face, the way Dad loaded my suitcase into the car like he was checking off a chore. I remembered standing in my dorm room, looking out at the courtyard, feeling like I was stepping into something bigger, a beginning, but every return home chipped away at that feeling. With each holiday, each weekend, each phone call where I listened more than I spoke, I shrank a little more. Until I wasn't someone with a voice. I was a role, a placeholder, the quiet one, the glue, the one who didn't need much and so was given even less. I paused, saved the document, and closed my laptop. I didn't name the file. Not yet. Some truths don't burn. They bruise until they become scars, and scars don't need titles. Later that day, I walked through the weekend market in downtown Santa Fe. Tourists meandered, kids tugged at balloon strings, couples argued over whether to get chili or cinnamon candles. I passed by a booth selling hand-painted ceramics and paused in front of a bowl nearly identical to the one from my childhood kitchen, the one Mom used for pancake batter every Sunday. I reached for it, then let my hand fall. I didn't need to carry replicas of a past that only looked warm in retrospect. Love without honesty is just control in disguise. I walked away, hands empty, and for the first time, it didn't feel like I was lacking anything. No bag, no burden. That evening, back at the apartment, I opened my phone gallery and began scrolling through old voicemails, ones I'd ignored, ones I hadn't deleted, even though I meant to. Mom's voice filled the room, soft and rehearsed. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Hope you're well. Call when you can." Then another. "Just checking in. Your dad says hi." Not once did they ask how I was really doing. Not once did anyone say, "We heard you." It was always small talk dressed as affection, safe, distant, shallow. I deleted them one by one, not out of anger, but to make room. I didn't want my phone filled with ghosts who never asked if I slept through the night. I kept one message, the first voicemail Darcy left after I moved to Santa Fe. "Hey, just making sure you're settling okay. You don't have to call me back. I just wanted you to know someone sees you." I played that one twice. Then, as night crept in, I sat at my desk and pulled out a yellow legal pad. I didn't want to type this part. I wanted to write it in ink, to feel it leave my hand. I wrote a letter addressed to Dad, not to mail, not even to read out loud. "You taught me discipline, silence, duty," I wrote, "but you never taught me how to be loved while being seen." I wrote about the day he let Cora move into my room without asking, about the night he laughed at dinner and called me dead weight in front of company, about the years of being praised for not needing attention and how that praise turned into the reason they never gave me any. I acknowledged the good moments. The time he stayed up helping me build my 5th grade volcano project, the time he told me I had his stubborn streak, and meant it as a compliment. But even those came with conditions. Small gifts always attached to performance. Kindness given with a timer. I ended the letter simply, "I don't hate you. I just finally stopped trying to make you love me in a language you never spoke." I folded the page and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk, behind a stack of old receipts and expired coupons. Then I walked to my bookshelf, grabbed an old journal, and placed a sticky note on the spine. Chapter 1, Mine. I sat by the window again, the evening breeze rolling in, brushing against my skin like a reminder that I was still here, still rebuilding, still choosing. My phone buzzed once. An email. Subject, "Let's talk." It was from an editor. A mid-sized publishing blog I'd pitched on a whim 3 weeks earlier. Body, "We read your submission. We think your voice deserves space." I didn't smile, I didn't cry, I just exhaled. I never needed permission, just enough silence to hear myself. I sat at my desk in Santa Fe as dawn light filtered in through the blinds. The quiet felt expansive, deliberate, unlike the suffocating stillness I'd known at home for years. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. In bold, I typed the final sentence of my article. I never needed permission, just enough silence to hear myself. I exhaled. The line echoed everything. Years of silence, of staying small so others didn't fall, of hiding my needs behind quiet. A message from the editor popped up. "Your voice is the story. Publishing tonight." My breath caught. I typed back, "More than I've ever been." Then my phone buzzed again. "Darcy, you ready?" I stared at the screen. If they silenced me for years, I owed them one sentence that would echo. I tapped send and watched the article go live. It felt like the first time I was seen, fully, on my own terms. I refreshed the site, and my story appeared with the title, "When a Dog Got the Room and the Daughter Got the Shed." The first words matched the tone I wanted. My name was taken off the door, but not off the story. Below, receipts and screenshots lay out the facts: co-founder documentation, tax misuse, emotional testimony, everything I needed to be said, but delivered calmly, without bitterness. Immediately, the internet reacted. Twitter exploded, Facebook lit up, and news alerts pinged my screen like fireworks. Major outlets began covering the unfolding family saga. Zara's Zen homepage was either taken down or redirected to a placeholder reading, "Updating our offerings." Comments everywhere carried the same refrain: "We made the wrong one famous." For the first time, the world was hearing the full truth, not what the dog influencer brand had sold, but the erased voice behind it. Back in the group text, which I'd left unread, messages flew in. "Eve, you embarrassed the family." Cora, "You used us for clout." Lou, "You've made your point. Come home and we'll talk." I didn't reply. I didn't need to explain. I just read and silently archived the messages. Accountability often sounds like cruelty to those with immunity, and that was fine. I didn't need them to hear me. I needed them to hear themselves. Later, I walked through the neighborhood. On San Lorenzo Boulevard, the last Zara Zen billboard was being taken down. I paused. It used to show Zara's smiling face with Cora's tagline, "Built on trust." Now it was blank, just pale steel and lumbering scaffolding. I thought, that wasn't karma, that was consequence. No one handed me payback. I didn't have to preserve that moment for likes. I just watched it end. Then I kept walking. No cameras, no record. Just the momentum of something finally falling away. And a faint, knowing smile that this time, it wasn't on me to document. The next morning, I met a podcast producer at a cozy cafe near the plaza. He was quiet, curious, leaning in over warm light. "You're the voice no one expected," he said gently. "That's why it worked." I stirred my tea. It was strong and honest. "I wasn't trying to be viral," I said. "I was trying to be honest." We talked through the next steps, not as a daughter who'd been silenced, not as a survivor defined by crisis, but as someone ready to build her own identity, voice, and audience. I planned more than media. I thought about writing, speaking, connection. They taught me silence. I learned to master it, then use it strategically. I used it to protect myself, and then to rebuild me. That evening, I walked home with the weight of my memoir manuscript in one hand, car keys in the other. The sky was a deep pink turning to navy. I paused on my stoop, the pages in my hand thick with proof, my story, my life, and the truth I had excavated. I opened the file and typed, "They lost me when they needed me most," and I never looked back. I hit send on the final draft to my agent. Within seconds, my phone dinged. An email reply. "We'd love to publish your book." It felt like the end and a beginning all at once. I closed my eyes and just let that feeling wash over me. Not triumphant, not hollow, just whole.